and the realization that actually things haven't changed that much.
At core, I think people do business with people.
Yes.
Why it is important to have the personal brand?
Go back beyond that 3 paragraphs, everything that was been written about her. So what? Know who you are, have a persona, have your own character, have your own uniqueness.
Even in the business world, what are the things which you see that needs to stop now?
Okay, so what people need to stop now?
Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Behind the Glass Door podcast. Um, I'll give you some context. When I started this, I gathered a few friends together from my LinkedIn network. I used to talk to them often, and it was quite easy to get them on the board. But honestly, we haven't met many times.
No, we're having that. So thank you for having me. I mean, it's really great to be here. I'm delighted to join you and help you with this venture. It's fantastic. So yeah, I know we only met once, I think.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and it goes back to the memory, right? So we
yeah.
met once in a conference last year. Um, I was in audience, and you were giving a speech. Um, what fascinated me there is how you connected history and modern business trade. So for our audience, how do you introduce yourself? And I want to deep dive into all the aspects.
So that how I introduce myself has changed over the years. I used to introduce myself as like product marketing. I now sort of introduce myself more as um, a historian, to be honest. So as I've got older, I've transitioning myself more from a product role or a business role more into a personal role. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think the presentation you saw was all around the history. I blend in my historical interest into procurement, and
Right.
and that's come about because of the work I've done by writing and the realization that actually things haven't changed that much.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty much the same problems, just different technology that sits around us. So yeah,
Yeah. So you wear many hats, right? Historian, author, product marketing guru,
yeah.
and then procurement interaction. And it goes back to how you started your career, right? So walk us through maybe from childhood days, because I'm really keen to know how this history bug bitten you.
Okay. So the history bug bit me when I opened up a book. I think it was the Reader's Digest book of English history, I think, or British history. And in the middle of that page was, or the middle of the book was a picture of it was a 17th century picture of a battlefield or a battle. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And that then got my bug and my history bug going, and particularly in 17th century English history.
Right.
So, and then I just became fascinated with history generally throughout my school years, but I never took it as a qualification.
Right.
For a number of reasons. One is I didn't really want it to become tainted
Mm-hmm.
because when you do it formally, you sort of lose that. It becomes a thing you've got to do.
Right.
You sort of lose that interest a little bit. It becomes a something. But I've always kept it at the back of my mind. I've always done things. I've always things like wargaming, which I'll come back to, which is like recreating history on the table.
Yeah.
But then I also moved into doing research, reenactment, where you dress up in costume and
Mm.
fight battles wearing kit and a costume. So, and I rose up to the ranks doing that whilst working at the same time to become a colonel of a regiment.
Right.
And that came with a lot of responsibility because it's not just on the battlefield, it's running the regiment off the battlefield, the admin of it all. But as you go up through the ranks, obviously you learn different things.
Yeah.
And that's also fed into my books. So one of my books, or two of my books, is also about how you actually fought a battle in history. Not what we thought it is, but actually what they were taught at the time.
So when exactly the first book came out?
So the
Instead of
the first book came out. We sort of skipped a whole lot of my life, but the first book came out when I became a civil servant.
right.
So I've been a number of companies doing different product marketing roles, but also running networks and other things. And I decided to step back in and actually cross the table and move into the procurement side.
Right.
And
So this was not your first job, right?
this is not my first job. I'd been through. I'd left school at like 15.
Okay.
And I've worked non-stop since. I've never had a day off other than
Right.
holidays, I suppose, out of work. And I've always moved through that career path as a working. So I've had a number of jobs. I've run my own business for a while. And product marketing has been something that I've done all the way along.
Right.
But I've done sales, I've done pre-sales consultancy, training.
Mm.
all sorts of different functions. And I thought, actually, you know what? There's an opportunity to move into Crown Commercial Services, which is the public sector procurement,
Right.
because I wanted to learn a little bit more. I'm always learning, basically. I always see the next job as a learning opportunity. So I moved into Crown Commercial Services and procurement, and suddenly I got a bit of work-life balance. I've been planning to write books for like 20 years. I never had the balls to jump, if you like, and start it. But when I had civil service job, suddenly I could close my laptop at 5:30.
Right. Yeah.
And I also by that time, we'd also moved to the family were living in France, and I was living in England. So in the evenings, it was becoming a little bit, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
So suddenly, opportunity to close the laptop and get on with my life, and writing became something I could do. So I approached a publisher, Hellion,
Yeah.
with a book idea, and they said yes, and I got a contract to write the book. And that was back in 2020. So
Right.
20 years of research then went into that book, and that sort of kick-started my writing, if you like, and that journey of becoming an author and a full-time employee in business. But that's yeah, that's
Right.
how it happened.
There is a lot to unfold here, right? So
Yeah,
4 years, then 4 books now, and I know one more is coming.
yeah.
But what do you do as a day job? Like what do you do in product marketing right now?
Okay, so product marketing is all about joining together the customer, what the customer needs are, um, how we then sell the product to that market, how we demonstrate it, how we build the product. So a lot of my time is actually so it's split into two halves. There's the product piece, the actual bit, the product, and then there's the market.
Right.
And a lot of my time is focused on the market, because you need to know what people want before you can build or sell it or promote it. So I've been working very closely within the Middle East, Gulf region recently, to really learn how people buy, but also what they need from our product, and how to translate our solution, the Ivalua product, into the market need.
Right.
And that's all about, understanding how people buy, and working at what they need. Because you can't take, and this is a big mistake people have, is take something that's really good in the US and go, okay, we just could put it in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't work. You have to, in these day and age, you really have to have something that is relatable to people in each market. And that takes time to learn about what people need and what they want.
What remains core though in every market? I mean, I looked at your LinkedIn and you're pretty much everywhere
Yeah.
every other week, right? But there has to be some similarities anywhere you go. I'll give you example. So I started work in India, moved to Singapore, did bit of work there, and now in London from last 2 years. At core, I think people do business with people,
Yes.
and at core that remains same, right? What we have observed. Um,
So yeah, absolutely. So people are people, and I think that's one of the things I love about the Middle East at the moment is it's all about relationship,
right.
and we've lost that relationship part in Europe and North America.
Mhm.
It's become very much everything's done online. It's very impersonal. Even the procurement process is impersonal.
Mm.
Whereas in the Middle East, it's all about relationship and building that relationship. That means you get to know people and understand what their problems are, understand what they're trying to achieve, uh, and that's really, really important. But the underlying problem is, how do they buy something in the most efficient way, get the best prices, get the best value? Um, that problem has not changed for millennium. Yeah,
Right.
and that's what really came out when I wrote my book. My first book is I realized, actually, if I want to get the truth about what happened,
Mm-hmm.
go to the archives and look at the financial records for the War Department, and you can see everything that was bought, everything that was ordered, when it was sold, when it was paid for, who ordered it, and it's all there in massive ledger books that are big. Yeah, and each quarter's like, I suppose 6 or 7 inches thick. It's
Yeah.
big books and massive. You open them up and you can see literally all the order, this supplier, what we bought from them, when we paid for them.
And thanks to all those historians who kept it, right.
Yeah,
Um,
it's actually the archive. So in every country's got archives,
mm,
and those archives are then stored away in big vaults, I suppose, ultimately. But yeah, we've got the British Library here. We've got the Kew Gardens, Kew Archives. There's the National Bibliothèque in France. There's the Hague Archives. So every country's got these archives,
right.
and they contain mountains of paper. And that's just the lesson for history. I can go and look at something from 350 years ago, and I can open up a book and see it. I'm not sure what we're going to do in 350 years when we look back at this time,
Right.
because it's all digital and hard to
So,
find.
I mean, and at the same time, it could be a problem of plenty, right? You have so many resources, you have so many things to look after and to compile into a book, a readable content in a precise manner. I'm keen to know what's your process like. If you are starting on a book, how do you go about it? Maybe you can talk about the book you are writing right now.
Yeah, okay. So research is the number one thing, and you have to start with working out who you're going to be.
Mm,
So my persona as a writer is I'm a historical detective,
right.
and the reason for that was very much with the first book. When I did the first book, I thought I knew the period. I've been reading. I read every single book about the period. I thought I'd just do it like that, and I literally wrote my the first draft of it within 3 months. I thought, okay, what I need to do now is go back and just backfill a little bit the research and just check the archives.
Yeah.
And literally, the first thing I did was look at the archives and open up the book, and it says, "This is what happened. This is actually what happened." And I go, "That's not what I've read. It's
Mm,
not all the historians before me have told me. They've told me something totally different. I've now read something that makes everything they've written factually impossible."
right.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Interesting.
suddenly, and I then go, okay, well, let's park that one. That might just be an anomaly. No, every single other element I looked at, what I thought I knew was wrong.
Okay.
Not because historians deliberately made mistakes, but because historians use other historians. And over time, you get layers and layers and layers of information it's a bit like Chinese whispers.
Yeah.
And somewhere along that line, someone can add in something that creates history that becomes tainted.
Mm,
So, for example, the first thing I looked at was this whole thing of okay, how did the armies move? And there's this thing that's now often quoted that, well, actually, with the Monmouth Rebellion, uh, all the infantry jumped on horses and then on the cavalry horses, and they got to this place really quickly.
yeah.
It is physically impossible for that
Impossible.
to happen.
Yeah.
Not only because they had artillery pieces, but also because they weren't all in the same place when history said they were.
Right.
Okay, and that suddenly means that everything changes. And so what I had to do is throw away my book that I drafted and then go back to the grassroots and look at all the documents and create a brand new timeline for history.
Right.
Because I didn't know where the facts would be. And so with my latest book, which is about Lucy Walter, she's a person that became quite close to me. In fact, she's probably my mistress, because she's everywhere. She's actually in my laptop. I
Right.
write. And but I've had to go back to a point in time, and I can clearly identify where the first tainted history came in,
Mm.
and go, I know from that point onwards, everything that's been written about her is wrong, because
Okay.
every reference
Is
to
it
that piece.
because, like, there is a saying, winners get to write history?
To a certain extent, yes, and that's it. The winners get to write history, but also the propagandists get to write
Mm,
history, and
that's interesting.
what we see and read is actually propaganda,
Mm,
and it's not. It's the old adage of the first person to publish is the first person. Yep, the first piece of information you read is what sticks in your mind the longest.
right.
And so and historians have a habit of going, okay, this person was there, or they're writing a memoir, and that, therefore they're telling a fact.
Mm,
But everybody has a perspective. You've got a different perspective to this conversation to me.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've all got a different viewpoint,
Mm,
and that viewpoint is tainted by our political views, by our religious views, by our personalities, by our angle. And that comes across when you write.
yeah.
And when you realize that, when I realized that as a writer, that everybody has got their own political perspective or their own personal perspective, suddenly you need multiple views of that one angle. And that means that as things get changed, when people start to use just one reference,
Mm,
that immediately alarm bells ring,
right.
because who is that one person, and was that one person's perspective correct or not correct?
Right.
And I'll give you one easy example. Okay, so Lucy Walter, she's described as many things, and I'll let the readers go off and the listeners go off and explore her before they've seen my book. And the there's at the point. So she has 2 children. A second child's a daughter, and this tainted history view names the father, gives the father name, which has been interpreted. No, that it's Lord Collington. That role, Earl of Collington, never existed
Right.
at that
Okay.
date. So historians have said it's either Arlington or Collingford. Okay, and there are 2 branches of history that say Lucy's second child's father was this person or this person. Okay, and that's followed all the way through history. No one's bothered to look at the fact that Lucy Walter wasn't actually with either of those 2 characters
Hmm.
when Mary the child would have been conceived.
Right.
She was in Rotterdam, and they are in Paris. Now, there's a physical, biological problem with them both being the father,
Yeah.
but no one has bothered to look at that.
So there is one standpoint
Yeah.
which says, do you really need to set the facts straight, or we just take the key learnings from history and go ahead? What's your point on that? I'm keen to
I
know.
think, okay, so I'm going to quickly jump off an angle a little bit, but I think that today is a chance with the digital age that we have and AI technology and all those other things that are going to create even more tainted history, that we need a perspective that is true.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm looking at documents that sit in archives that are pieces of paper that Google knows nothing about. Okay. And not only does Google know nothing about, it also, if it does know about it, it knows one line. So that example I gave you about the 2 fathers
Yeah.
who are physically impossible to be the father, that's Google's view. Google will take that and they'll go, okay, well, the probability is this father because there's more people written about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't know that. And the reason it doesn't know that because it hasn't looked at the archive document
Right.
that proves that she wasn't where people say she was. Okay. And the reason for that is because the summary in the books is like a 2-line summary. The detail is in the evidence is in the detail when you look at the whole letter
Yeah.
that's been summarized into 2 pages, into 2 lines, sorry, which could be 3 pages. The details are in there. And you have to look at the original document. And
It's fascinating. I mean,
that's, yeah.
all this in, and I can almost see your face lighting up when you talk about history. I'm now trying to balance it out or figure it out. How do you manage to get the modern product marketing job, brush with procurement, and also keen on history? They seems to be 2 different poles, right?
Yes and no. So, as I said right at the beginning, the problem for procurement is identical to the problem procurement had when I wrote my book. So, if the 685 rebellion, the guy sat in Tower of London ordering stuff, making sure the right shipments went out with the army, making sure the right equipment was there. They did that job. Yeah, exactly the same problems. They had to work out, how do they manage supply chain risk? How do they manage getting the right, best quality of items? How do they make sure they've got a decent, robust supply chain? Exactly the same problems as today. They had big ledgers and lots of paper. They had potentially orders from the king to go and buy stuff. We're going to run this campaign. We're going to go and fight a war. We need all this stuff, right? Exactly the same problem as a guy sitting today in a procurement system going, okay, I need to go and buy this stuff.
Right.
It's CapEx or it's, I need to build a new warehouse, whatever it might be. Exactly the same problem.
Better tools, P2P systems,
I would say,
but same financial approvals. Like instead of king, there is a CPO now who approves things.
you could say the same, the titles have changed,
Yeah.
but the ownership is the same. So the king or the head of procurement, which was the sort of Ministry of War or whatever it might be, they've still got the same, there's still the same approvals and needs the procurement have. But what I'd say is that the technology hasn't changed the problem.
Right.
So what the technology does is, and this is now going to be a bit very controversial, technology is based upon the last change. So if I look at my career, I started with Z80 programming with green screen technology and typing pools and people physically typing on typewriters on pieces of paper. That was where I started. And I've seen technology changes take place, and it is a cycle, it's evolution that takes place. And if we look at the cycle, so I started my career in mainframes talking about
Mm.
time slicing. Now, no one knows what time slicing is
Right.
these days.
And which period is this? Like,
This is like Dark Ages. This is back in the 80s.
okay.
80s and 90s. So we had what was called time slicing. And what that meant was that companies would buy time
Hmm.
on a mainframe computer.
Okay.
So Maersk, for example, had big IBM mainframes and they'd rent out time slots, literally by the second, where
Right.
other companies would connect into that mainframe and that would do processing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that effectively is cloud computing. It's no different.
True.
Okay. It's the same thing. And then you've got client server technology, which is really where we have, and ERPs were an answer to distributed client server technology.
Mm.
Yep. So as we look at what happens is technology comes along to fix the last problem.
Right.
Yeah. So the last problem we had for cloud technology was client server mainframe technology. So the cloud has come along to fix that problem. Yeah.
Right.
So AI has come along effectively to fix the problem that was created by things being done incorrectly when cloud technology was released.
The whole thing about orchestration AI, is it fixing the last problem of multiple resources now? We need one place to go, grab everything together.
Yeah, it's correct. It's fixing some of that problem, but it is really based upon the truth.
Yeah.
So it goes back full circle. So when I look at technology cycles, when I look at evolutional technology, I think of there's lots of different cycles, lots of different things. So we are now AI. It's just another hype cycle. But what it's actually trying to do is make people more efficient in the time they've got.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that historically I can look at. The only thing that's changed, the problem is the same, is the amount of time people have to do that.
Right.
So in the 17th century, someone will get on a boat and they'd sail to North America, do some business and get the next trade winds back. And that could be a 7-month cycle.
True.
Yeah. Now I jump on a plane, I'm there the following morning and I can get back on another plane. And so time has changed.
Right.
But also the time it takes for us to process the challenge.
Mm.
So now we have instant data. We as humans don't necessarily know how to interpret instant data.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. There was recently news happened and people were asking about that news event, news channels, before the people who were actually responsible for that news event knew about it.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So suddenly it's all instant. So when you look at the procurement process, or you go and buy stuff, by the time you've ordered it and bought it, there could be something major crisis has happened that you didn't know was going to happen.
Correct.
That changes everything you do.
Yeah.
But everything is more instant. Now that problem is the same.
Mm.
If you look at boats coming from China all the way to Britain in the 17th century, you've got the same problem, which I think the presentation
the supply chain risk was
exactly.
there. The risk might be different.
Yeah.
Like more pirates attack maybe. Two delays in logistic now.
But you could say that I'd say the risk have got slightly better because in those days, 3 ships sail out, only probably 1 would come back.
Right. Yeah.
So over time, we've got better. But yeah, those risks are there. And I think so going back to that sort of thing, time is the thing that we struggle with. And I think, and I think one of my things these days is we're focusing so much on the wrong thing.
Right.
Technology should be giving us time back.
Yeah.
But I'm working, or other people, my colleagues and procurement teams are working just as hard as they were in the 17th century. But they've got all this equipment around them.
Right.
They're not getting time back. In fact, they're getting less time at home.
Yeah.
And
what a change for marketing. I mean, I'm still struggling to understand. Was marketing exist at that time? What had changed?
So if you look in a 17th century newspaper, there's adverts for books and adverts for stuff, missing cats and all sorts of stuff. So all the things we take for granted are there in history. I think our modern concept of marketing is very around advertising and producing content that's it's the same thing. Again, my problem with marketing is how do I know what you want to buy, and how do I position my product so you buy it?
Right.
Yeah, and if you go to anywhere in the world and you go to a bazaar or market, people are doing exactly that they used to do 400, 500 years ago.
Right.
They're selling their products, they're marketing their products, they're saying, this is the bestest, fastest, better, cheapest. This is better than the competition, and all the same things. It's just we have a digital view on it, but the problem is the same. How do I get my product to you and for you to understand what it is and why you should buy it?
Right.
That's the same problem.
Is it same with B2C? So you of course do a day job where you sell the product, which makes procurement bit easy for
Yeah.
clients. So that's more of a B2B marketing. But with your books, you do B2C marketing where you are asking normal people to buy these books. Is it the same, or what's the difference between B2B and B2C marketing?
Okay, so B2C, the customer, so my readers, what I'm trying to do is get across to them why they should read my book. Why is it interesting to them? What's my unique angle? What's my, why is it my book different to somebody else's book? That's really, that's through social media. That's my, in my own personal brand. But it's also from a messaging perspective. It's that instant. People quickly, they scroll through and they see things on social media very quickly. So you have to make things very eye catchy and things. In business to business land, things technology wise, people are a little bit more old school. Yeah. So we're finding now that actually old school things like flyers and stuff or direct marketing materials, because people are so bored with emails that they don't read them. So there's it's a continuously evolving cycle of how you address, but the core problem is the same. So for me, I want my readers to know why they should buy from me, why they should read my book. As a product marketing person working for Ivalua, it's
Right.
why is my product different to the competitors, and why my product is better for them to use? What's it going to give back to them in their lives? Why should they use my product?
Right.
So it's the same thing. It's just the angles are different. And from a personal perspective, it's more about your persona
Right.
than it is in a business perspective. It's more about fixing a pain. What's your business pain? I don't think anybody could say a reader's pain is I haven't got a book to read.
Yeah.
So it's more about why should I read your book?
Right. You mentioned something interesting about personal brand, right?
Yeah.
I genuinely think that personal brand gives you a undue advantage in any setup. Um, what's your opinion of it? My target audience is those who are just starting their careers. Why it is important to have the personal brand?
Okay, so personal brand is really important, and by that I mean everything. So I've always had a personal brand, and that evolves. And by personal brand means that, and I'll give you really one example, simple example. When I go and present, I never wear a blue suit or grey suit
Okay.
because I
Why?
want to
Why?
stand out. You want to stand out, okay? You want to be different. People, you want to be recognized by people. So, in my personal brand as a writer, I look like Indiana Jones. Yeah, I'm an explorer. I'm a
Right.
detective. I that is my persona when I talk and present, but also when I go to the office, when I go to meetings. I've got a little bit element of that all the time. So, and the reason we want that personal brand is because that's how people remember you.
Right.
And you don't go anywhere in life unless people remember who you are. And that, for me, that personal brand piece is, if you get that across, you realize that that is important. In my day, I was a punk rocker. Okay, so black spiky hair and all that sort of stuff, Sid
Right.
Vicious and blah blah blah. But that's a brand as well. That's you sit there and you want to look there, and I got people photographing me and the newspapers and stuff because you look different.
Yeah.
You're an icon, if you like.
Right.
And that personal brand then follows through. And as soon as you understand you have a brand, that's really important. So even when you're now with social media growing up, you have to have a brand.
True. True.
Yeah.
That reminds me. So I used to work in Accenture Consulting before the current job, and there was a saying from my partner saying, "Famous people won't get fired in any company. So be famous for something."
Yes.
I take it something similar to personal branding, right? If you have personal brand, it's not easy to hide somewhere. Your
You
personality
have to,
come up.
you have to be at the front. And I think if you want to hide, then it's easy to hide in businesses. But if you
Right.
want to be secure, I'll be blunt, then you have to stand out and you have to have a value. So even when I write my books, I'm focusing in on, yes, I'm a historian, I love history, but I had to focus in on a particular period of history and become the specialist in that period to create that brand and the knowledge. Same with my job. Um, I I love traveling around. People like me because I like presenting. I love presenting. And that gives me something that is unique to me in the company a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and I've got a lot of knowledge and obviously lots of grey hair, so that helps. But no, you have to have something that makes you stand out, makes people understand who your boss needs to know who you are.
Right.
Yeah, if they don't know, your boss doesn't know who you are, then you're not going to be at the top of the list when they come to we don't want to get rid of you list.
Right.
Yeah,
So, couple of questions, follow up, right?
yeah,
You mentioned something about you focus on one area, one
yeah.
history period. Is it important to find the niche, or is it better to be generalist because you don't know where the world is going? Is it better to have a generalist role or a specialist role?
So generalist roles are okay. I think it gets to a certain point with a generalist role, but if you want to really make a mark, you have to become a specialist.
Right.
If you really want to, you want to have to. If you really want to be seen and to have a voice, then you can only do that by being specialist. If you're too general,
Mm.
then you can get away with. Historians can be quite generalist. They can write lots of books on generalist history, but their level of knowledge is quite flat.
Mm.
If you want to, in big business particularly, if you can, procurement is a specialization,
Right.
yeah, and you can drill down in procurement to different levels of specification, but actually, if you don't have a specialization, again goes back to that brand. Why are you there?
Right.
Yeah, what are you really adding? What's your value add to the organization, to the history, to whatever it might be?
Right.
Because if you are general, then you're treated general.
Mm.
Yeah. If you're specialist, then you have a niche, and you have to keep. And by specialist, I don't mean that means you stay in that field for the whole of your life. Like if I was a specialist, doing what I did when I left school, then I would have been made redundant like 10 years later. And
Right.
no, so you always have to keep that specialization evolved and up to date and moving forward. You can't sit back on your laurels,
Right.
and you have to make a choice sometimes, like I did when I moved to Crown Commercial Services, to go, actually, you know what? I reached a plateau in my life. If I now want to move to the next level, which is where I am now,
Mm.
is might have to take a step back. I didn't
Mm.
go into a senior role in Crown Commercial. I went into architectural role
Right.
because I wanted to learn. And now I use that learning when I talk publicly because I've got a degree of experience in that role.
Right.
I can speak now with a different persona, different perspective,
Mm.
and I can use what I learned before with plus those things together to have a different voice when I come to present.
Well, that's fascinating. And looking at back at my career as well, I started with oil and gas as an industry, doing completely different, straight out of college, buying and selling stuff. Then moved to consulting, which opened up the world and look at the problems from a different angle.
Yeah.
Suddenly, your thinking changes, and then went into commercial services at across the geographies. But if someone is starting new in their career, how do they know that okay, this is the time now to switch, and now I have reached my plateau? How do we find out?
I think the answer is quite easy. Well, you reach your plateau when the job becomes so easy.
Right.
Yeah. When the job becomes so easy that you can do it with your slippers on. Yeah.
Right.
That means you're no longer learning.
Mm.
And when you've stopped learning, you've got two choices. You either carry on and become the person that sits with the slippers on in the back of the room, and
Mm.
you become a specialist, but then you risk becoming outdated very quickly.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's when you reach that plateau where everything is so easy you can do it with your eyes closed.
Mm.
At that point, you need to decide: do I want to, be my boss?
Mm.
Which is always a career path. I always want to be my boss, my boss, my boss. But that then becomes very political, and it gets messy. Or you go, okay, do I want to take a step back and learn something new that's going to take me to the next level?
Right.
And by next level, I don't mean necessarily next title. I
Mm.
mean your next level in your life.
Right.
So for me, going to Crown Commercials was I want to get to the next level, which is I know I'm getting old. I want to be able to do more public speaking. I want to speak with a voice that says I've done procurement. So I decided to do that, and that was a conscious decision to step back into a more junior role,
Right.
but to learn, and that
But that
allowed me to
shows a
learn.
lot of risk-taking appetite, right?
Yeah,
It's not easy
no,
at times. How do you manage to have that internal conversation saying, I'm okay to step back now? It might impact, I don't know, monetary aspect,
I think
social aspect.
I think the role again is finding the right opportunity. It's right, seeing the okay, I'm on a plateau, I'm on a straight road, okay, and identifying when that fork comes up, when the opportunity comes up. Yeah, there's loads of balances. You don't want to throw your career away, or you want to lose loads of money, or whatever it might be, but there will come forks, and it's then having the confidence to go, okay, I can take a fork, because actually that's going to be the faster route to getting to where I am. So as an example, you know, when I left school and my first job offers came, I had 2 job offers.
Okay.
And this is by the way, this is going to shock people. This goes back to the 80s. One job offer was in computing, and that was paying up £2,000 a year. Or the other job was in a factory paying £5,000 a year.
Okay.
And I looked at it and go, well, the factory's going to be great, but I'm going to hate that. I'll take the 2,000 a year and get a career that I can start on. And if I hadn't taken that fork, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now.
How that transpired? Tell me what £2,000 per year, by the way, which sounds really crazy at the current time.
Yeah.
But how it changed your life? Like, can you connect the dots? What happened
Yes,
because of that
absolutely.
job?
Because I then looked at that was doing early computing, it was doing font design
Right.
before scanners and stuff. So it was part of my passion. So I like fonts, strangely. And that then took me into programming. It then took me into working with printers. And that then took me into mainframes and updating and looking at mainframe data. That then took me into what we call protocol converters. That then took me into electronic invoicing. That then took me into AP. But actually, a step between that, I was one of the first people who did scanning of invoices for AP processing.
Okay.
Okay, that goes back into like the early 90s. So suddenly you got scanning. So that career path then started to progress based upon that first step. But at each stage of that path, I've got no qualifications. So I've never been to university. So I've got no qualifications. Each long way is building relationships for the next job.
Right.
Getting the right contacts, make sure that you've got the right profile, the right persona, the right visibility. Yeah. So along the way, I've known founders of companies, and they've then said, I really like what you do. Come and join me.
Right.
Almost all my career paths, except probably when I moved to Ivalua, have been based upon relationships.
Okay.
Yeah. Even the job going into the government was based upon people I knew. They trusted me. They knew what I could do, the abilities I had, and that then got me into that job. So, it's all about relationships. And
Right.
to me, that's and it's then learning right relationships, the right forks to take on that relationship.
Right.
And you have to trust people.
Yeah. It goes back to people love doing business with people, right?
Yes, exactly. It goes full circle.
When I see young generation joining corporate now, there is a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
So they see a startup news and then they want to start a startup. They see AI is the next thing. They will leave everything and join a course there. So there is a problem of plenty, right?
Yes.
Don't know where to go. In your career, because you have done product marketing, you're expert in it, historian, author, 4 books. I do want to talk about each book.
Okay.
And we can put the scripts, we can put the link in the description. But how do you choose what to do? How do you prioritize things? To add top of it, your business travel. I mean, when I look at your LinkedIn feed, you're traveling almost every week. How do you manage all these things?
Okay, so you have to think of the time you're doing. So I travel a lot, and that's a personal decision. So I could say, no, I don't want to do these journeys, but I love meeting people. I love meeting new cultures, and that's something that I've learned over time. So I've always traveled. My jobs, all the jobs I've had, have always meant I've been traveling around the world or around the country. So part of that is part of me inside is I like to meet new people and learn and listen, and that's part of my learning. So from the pure perspective of why I travel, I then bucket up my time. So what I've learned is you need to writing, you need to have research time. So sitting on an airplane, is a great time to look through all the photographs of all the documents I've done and read those old documents. It's a great time because you're sat on a plane, there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
It's also quite a good time to do some drafting and writing. So I have my laptop with me. I have Lucia with me. She's my current book all the time. And in fact, what I've been doing this time, I've been doing a diary of where she's been with me.
Right.
So I'm sitting in coffee shops. I'm sitting in airports. I'm sitting in hotels. I'm in museums. I'm in beautiful views. I've got stuff, and I'm always writing.
But do you switch on and switch off? Let's say
Yes.
you're going in a meeting now. How do you switch on, switch off um,
So,
from one career to another?
so it's actually quite a good way of doing it,
Mm.
because one of the things that I'd recommend anybody, that your listeners, is to understand a problem. You have to walk away from it and come back to it.
Right. Okay.
So in some ways, me traveling is a break between what I'm doing every single day, but it's also a break necessary from the writing piece. Or if I'm hitting a wall with the writing, doing my day job, suddenly it means my mind's I'm focused on something else. So when I come back to the writing, it's then, okay, I've now fixed that problem in my mind.
Okay.
So I spend a lot of time, both in my work and my personal life, thinking.
Mm.
Yeah. So travel, listening to another audiobook, listening to something else is a good time to detune from the problem and then retune back in again.
Right.
And people don't do enough. And that's, we mentioned about time being the challenge.
Yeah.
I see too many people not stepping back and digesting what they learned or what they've heard and instantly trying to respond, rather than go back. Okay, let's just take a step back. Let's get more than one perspective on what's happening,
Mm.
and then compile something. And AI is a classic example of people doing things that they could do anyway. So,
Right.
for example, I get asked, why don't I use AI to write my books?
Yeah. Well, that was actually one of the questions. How do you see impact of AI in
Well,
writing?
guess what? The book's me.
Mm.
AI is AI.
Right.
AI only knows what AI knows. And if I put my book into AI, then everybody else has my book.
Right.
So it's me. My book is me. It's my persona. It's my personality is in that writing. AI may help me check my spelling or check the structure, but when you're writing your personality into that book. And I think we are now in this hype cycle of AI doing everything, but we're going to come back to, probably in 2 years' time, people realizing actually the personal touch is what makes them different to the writer that uses AI to do everything.
How do you declutter things in mind? What's your way of decluttering? If you're so many thoughts, you want to take a step back, what's your way of doing it?
Oh, crikey. My brain is like a mess. It's like
Or does it work for you?
Ah.
You don't need to declutter.
So decluttering, sometimes it depends what you mean by decluttering. On my mind, I look at decluttering as trying to focus in on what's important.
Mm.
And quite often it's quite easy because the things that are really important float to the top. Yeah. If they're not important, they tend to float out.
Right.
Yeah. And it sounds a bit callous, but sometimes you do have to have that, top right mentality. Is it important? Is it critical? Is it?
Exactly. I think the urgent versus important thing get messed up so many times
Yeah.
that people forget what is urgent, what is important actually.
But it's also thinking about what follows.
Mm.
So what's the next?
Right.
I see a lot of people, and this is the time thing again, doing things. And they're not thinking actually what is the next step after that, and what's the next step after that, because that's a trap people get stuck into, and that's a basic historical trap as well. But with time pressures being so fast, you have less time to think about the next step.
Right.
Yeah, because it's there, it's instant. Okay, boom, boom, boom. I'm doing lots of things at once.
Yeah.
Whereas follow-up is really important. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And what follows this is actually the important question, followed by, so what?
Yeah.
So what if I don't do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People love to be busy, being busy.
Yeah.
And that's almost too sexy nowadays to be busy, to have hustle, but nobody likes to step back and think on these things. Even in the business world, what are the things which you see that needs to stop now?
Okay, so what people need to stop now, I'm going to be really blunt, hopefully some procurement audience out there, is writing things based upon what you have today.
Mm.
So I'll give you a classic example, the RFP, okay, the lists everything I've got today.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Every product does what you've got today. Otherwise, you wouldn't have what you've got today.
Correct.
Yeah. What you should be doing is going, what do I want tomorrow?
Mm.
What do I want tomorrow to look like? What's my outcome, my vision for tomorrow?
Yeah.
And tell people, I want that tomorrow. Yeah. I want something that's faster, quicker. Yeah, it's all normal. But I want my people to be working like this. I want them to do this. I want them to have a bit more time to think about the
Yeah.
yeah. You wouldn't know what your outcome's going to be, because guess what? Everybody can do what you've got today.
Yeah.
So
True.
where do I want to go? And people don't spend enough time thinking about where I want to go. It goes back to this time thing. They spend so much time going, oh, it's got to do this box, and you get 30 pages of tick boxes.
True.
Rather than
Don't get me started. Like it's a
it's-
whole different issue. Like
yeah.
personally for me, I love only two things in RFP. So my dream RFP is two questions or two information. One is what's my problem statement today, and
Yep.
second is what good looks like. Like this is the ultimate goal. And then I think suppliers are now mature to come up with solutions saying, we'll solve you this way.
And it goes back to that relationship.
Yeah.
If you go for a tick box, guess what? You're not having a relationship.
Yeah.
If you go to the, okay, this is my current challenge and this is where I want to go. Can you tell me how you want to get me from my problem to my solution?
Right.
Then suddenly you have a relationship, because you've got to listen to that person. They've got to explain how they're going to do it, and you're building a connection. And that thing called a relationship is fundamental to that partnership. And too often people are just buying off tick boxes,
Right.
without thinking about that relationship, because they haven't got time to think about the future.
Right.
But actually, that's what they should be doing.
Does it where the marketing steps in? Like you probably want to have an engagement without a RFP. Is that where the marketing kicks in and proves how we can help you?
I think the purpose of marketing is to explain that I know what your problem is. I've got empathy with your problem, and I think I can fix your problem. And yeah, I'm happy to go at RFPs. It's fine, but I don't. When I was in the government, we were all outcome based. We had
Right.
to write outcome based RFPs. So we go to market with this is what we want the future to look like. Tell me how you're going to get there, and then we'd score against how you're going to get us there. That ultimately is, I want to give the reader, the person buying, a view of what it's going to look like in the future.
Right.
Yeah. What is the art of the possible? How can you get somewhere? This is what is possible. This is what we can do today. But really, this is where you want to go, because you're going to go out to market. Whatever. I mean, this is boring stuff, but you're going to go out to market. It's going to take you 6-7 months. By the time you get it, by the time you implement it, that's another year down the line. Guess what? The world's changed.
Right.
Yeah. So you want to think about
No,
where you
no longer need it in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Your needs have changed because there is a time lapse.
Yes.
I feel like marketing as a department knows how to celebrate the success. You can see a lot of celebrities coming out doing marketing 9 to 5 job, and procurement is still behind. What's your opinion?
Okay. So I've sat both sides of the fence. Okay. So I've done the whole. We've got the RFP. We've done the responses, and yes, it's done. We've submitted the RFP. Great feeling. Off we go in the pub or whatever it might be to celebrate. But it's a better feeling on the other side of the fence, I felt, when you push the document out and you get your first answers back. That is like that's an amazing. It's like having a party. And you go, I have a party and I've invited all my friends, but are they going to turn up?
Right.
And it's when the first friend turns up, and then the second friend turns up, and it suddenly is a real party. And to me, that was a much more fulfilling experience in procurement than it was being a vendor going, I've pressed the button.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt that I've taken that away with me. I know that feeling, and that's one of the lessons I've learned is it's actually a really nice feeling to have people come to the party.
Right.
And people need to sit on both sides of the fence, need to realize that it's a relationship ultimately.
Right.
You know.
It goes back to the relationship thing.
Yeah.
We're coming to the last segment, right?
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about each book and the upcoming book
Yeah.
when we can see it. But before that, I want to ask this question. I know you're based in France.
Yes.
We're shooting this in the UK.
Yeah.
What's the one thing which you miss in France from UK, and what's the one thing which you don't miss?
Okay. So the one thing I really miss, and this is not going to be politically incorrect, in the United Kingdom is I miss pubs.
Okay.
In France, there's no pubs. You can't go and sit and drink or just sit and chat. Yeah, there's bar to backs, but they're very social things. They're not somewhere you sort of just sit. And they also close really early in the countryside. So I really miss that sort of the ability of just go to a pub, stop, sit down, have nice food, relax and chill. That atmosphere you get in a public house it's just, I miss that in France. What I don't miss is the traffic, the congestion, the claustrophobic. When I come to the UK, I always feel claustrophobic.
Right.
You know, even I've been to Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh has probably got the worst traffic, to be totally honest. But somehow it still feels not so claustrophobic as here.
Manage chaos, like
It's managed chaos, but here it's just organized. It's just organized claustrophobia.
yeah.
Everything I don't know. So I really hate coming back here because of the congestion. You can't guarantee how long it's going to take to get anywhere. I came up here by train because I hate driving into Reading because it could take you from 10 minutes to 2 days, you know?
Right. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
unpredictable.
I'm really glad that you are here
Yeah.
in Reading. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I do agree with you for the pubs thing. So I moved to UK roughly 2 years now, and suddenly I know now what local pub is
Yeah.
and what it means, and the relationship with you have with the people who are regular there. You meet them often. You start new connections and so on. So yeah, fascinated by it as well.
Yeah, it's a great place to learn, and you say you just meet new people, and it's a place where people don't have any inhibitions. Almost,
Yeah.
you're happy to talk to a total stranger in a pub.
Exactly.
But you wouldn't do that in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Somehow I don't know why, but pub feels more safe place where you can
Yeah.
open up. Maybe it's the alcohol which is doing it, but it feels safe, right?
yeah, I think you can do it without alcohol, but yeah, it's a safe place. Absolutely, it's a comfortable place.
So the last part, Steve, now I want our audience to know about your books. I know we have your books here. You want to talk about them one by one, how people can read it, where they
Yeah.
get it.
Okay.
If you want, I can help you with the titles, so
Yeah.
I can bring it. I think I'm not sure if I'm
This
going
one here, this Fighting for Liberty is the first book.
right.
So this is with a book I started when I was a civil servant, and
Right.
to me it was I wanted to tell the truth about the Monmouth Rebellion,
Okay.
and Hellion said yes, they'll publish it for me, and it was my first experience of writing a book. And if I could write it again now, it would be different because I've learned more.
Right.
But this is where I learned that I had to really go back to the basics to understand it, and why also all the images and stuff are all mine. So I don't use anybody else's artwork. It's all things I've bought. 'Cause
Yeah.
part of the experience for me is the books as well, and having the books. So it's all about the Monmouth Rebellion, telling it from a ground level perspective, not from a helicopter view of the world history. It's a gritty. This is actually what happened on the field. This is how they marched. This is how they walked around, and and through this, Duke of Monmouth is the character I sort of base my unique selling point, or my core focus, and through him his mother Lucy Walter, and the rebellion has been again misinterpreted quite a lot, but I really wanted to give a ground perspective of
Right.
what happened in the rebellion. So the first book was all about that,
Yeah.
and while I was writing that book, I suddenly realised I'll leave next to here.
I think the series, right? It came in
I
two
suddenly,
volumes.
I suddenly realised that actually I didn't know everything I thought I knew.
Okay.
But not just about the history of the Monmouth Rebellion, but also about how they fought.
Yeah.
And I realised that I actually needed to relearn the military art.
Right.
And I said I did a reenactment, so I knew all the drill procedures, how to fire weapons, and I had a very modern perspective on history from that perspective. So I really wanted to go back and learn actually how they fought, and I realised that I didn't know it. So I started researching French books, and I started reading all the French manuals. And Science for Arms is all about how to, if you were a king or a general, how would you go from the start to create an army? So Monmouth in 685 did that.
Yeah.
He started from nothing to create an army of like 10,000 men. How do you buy the equipment? How you arm them? How you train them? How you maneuver them on the battle? How get them on the campaign? How do you feed them? Supply them? All that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I realized that no one had written a book that said that. So my Science for Arms is basically like a drill book, a Haynes manual for the general of the 17th century.
Right.
So it's all about you. If you wanted to do this, how would you do it? What do you need to do? What characteristics should
Would
you
love to have an analogy with business now.
Yeah.
Like exactly what they did and what we should do now.
So there's a whole section here about how they bought and equipped and how they formed the armies and the baggage trains. And so there's actually going to be 3 volumes. There's only 2 at the moment. One's all about the preparing, why you should fight, the things, how you train the soldiers, infantry, cavalry, and then the second book's all about really how you fight the battle and fight the campaign. And the reason that and the last one's going to be about fortifications, how you do siege warfare and things. But the idea was a historian or a writer could pick up my book and they can then interpret history. So they can say, okay, I can look at a map. I now understand, if you read my book, why the soldiers in those locations.
Mm.
I can understand why Monmouth declared war.
Mm.
Okay, why they published the declaration. They don't need to do that
Right.
because at the time, that's what made it a just war in the eyes of the powers that be or God.
Yeah.
You had to have a just war. So everything that happens when you suddenly look at the timelines in Fight for Liberty book, and I looked at it, and now, so when I said knowing now what I know about Science for Arms, I can then reinterpret all the facts I've got from Fighting for Liberty.
Right.
And the
last one, yeah.
The last one is One King, so it's a bit of a combination between Science for Arms and Fighting for Liberty, but it's actually like a guidebook for the war game or historian,
Right.
about how to recreate the Monmouth Rebellion in a bit more of a gamey type way. So One King's all about it's more like a games book,
Right.
for the period.
And we spoke about Lucy Walters, but
yes,
do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would love to add. I've only got 5 minutes here. So Lucy Walter is, as I said, she's been the character that's been with me for 25 years. And I've always felt like her son, Duke of Monmouth, he's been misinterpreted.
Mm.
But particularly for Lucy, everything that's written about her is basically based upon 3 paragraphs in a book.
Okay.
3 paragraphs written by effectively her arch enemy.
Okay. That's interesting.
But they're worse than that. It's 3 paragraphs in a book written by somebody else based upon his interpretation of history.
Okay.
Using King James II's memoir.
It's a fictional story, right?
So if you look at those 3 paragraphs, it's written by somebody that had a very historical perspective bias as a Jacobite. So everything's written with a Jacobite lens, which means everything that James II done is perfect. The second thing is the memoirs were written in the 1690s, and they're talking about things that happened 35 years before,
right,
out of context. So if you read that paragraph out of context, you think it's a perfect story. If you read it in context, he's talking about things that happened in 1649, actually in the context of things that happened in 1685. So it wasn't written at the time. So it's even by the person, King James II, it's a retrospective memoir based upon his memory of things that happened. It's not actually a first-hand account of things that took place. So you've got that, and then you've got the fact that someone else has come along and added their historical bias into that story, added in flavour, like Lucy's daughter has 2 fathers.
Right. Yeah.
Physically impossible, biologically and geographically. And you go, but everything that's been written, everything you read in Google is based upon 3 paragraphs that has been totally tainted by that one writer.
It must be taken a lot of research for this book.
Massive.
When it's coming out, I'm sure.
I'm trying to finish it at the moment.
Right.
So she's with me here, and she's on the train with me. I'm trying to get her finished this month. So as a final draft, and then to the editor and the publishing house, which is Pen and Sword, by the middle of April. Because I've actually got 2 weeks off in India. So I'm on holiday in India for 2 weeks.
Excellent. Yeah.
So, so she is really important. The reason she's important is that if her story is true, and she was married to King Charles II, then the Jacobite myth is lies. Right. Because James II was actually a usurper, and Monmouth was the true heir to the throne. And that destroys everything you read in history going forward since 1685 onwards. Right. So I had to get the facts right, I had to get the story right, all the details right, and really go back beyond that 3 paragraphs, everything that was been written about her. And that's literally, I didn't realize how much the research, how much you could find out about her by actually going back to original documents, including things that say we're going to cover this up. So I'm not going to go there anymore.
I have to end this podcast with the last question, quite selfish. I'm fascinated by history of commerce, right? History of trading, from bartering to now Bitcoin, right? The way people do business with each other. And one day I plan to write a book, right? What's the advice you have for me in terms of how do I start?
Okay.
the approach and everything.
Okay. Start with why and so what. So what? If you write this big, so what? What's going to do? So who's your reader, and why are they going to buy your book? So what? And then why me? Why should they follow? Why should they listen to me as the writer?
Right.
Why am I? What makes me the special person they should listen to? Why can't I just Google it and find it out? So yeah, it goes back to what we've been talking about. So what? Know who you are. Have a persona. Have your own character. Have your own uniqueness. And then that personality is why people read books, to learn or to get stuff. But they actually read, if you think about it, because they want to read about that writer.
Right.
The writer is what they're actually listening to or reading about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. Really pleasure to have you meeting second time. So
It's a real pleasure. It was fantastic. It was really good. It was a lovely experience. So thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.